Susan Walke.
Here.
Kip Ward.
Here.
Judy Casper.
Here.
Deanna Hinton.
Here.
Riley Hoagland is excused. He'll be here later. Dick Anderson.
Here.
And Don Williams.
Here.
I see no citizens who wish to speak. Minutes of the meetings. Do I hear a motion?
I move to approve the meeting minutes listed as D1, 2, and 3, January 23rd, February 23rd, and February 27th.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of the meetings of January 23rd, February 13th, and February 27th, 2017. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is special order of business presentations, prioritization of projects, continued from 2 weeks ago and 2 weeks before that.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Chen.
so for tonight's presentation, I brought up our three experts in this. We're adding one, so this is a carry forward of from our last meeting in which we're still trying to prioritize the projects and actually select a project for the final issuance of the bond. There is one part of the discussion I wanted to interject at this point. I was asked, and we asked the question, do we have to decide right now in order to issue a bond, or can we wait? And the answer to that is maybe. It depends on the project. And so I've asked Debbie Mimoni to give us an update on the bond schedule if we try to meet the June 30th deadline. So she's going to address that now.
Give us the money.
Excuse me. So we got an initial time frame from our financial advisor, and I've updated that to the current, and we're basically at a point where we need to move forward in order to have the proceeds by about mid-June if we were to start tomorrow. So I didn't bring the revised schedule with me.
So if you recall, there are two types of projects, and depending on which one of those projects that you choose will determine what type of bond you will be issuing. Also would remind you that the deadline is an artificial deadline. Our final payment for our existing bond isn't due until June of 2018. We just have an opportunity to save some interest by paying it off early, and so that's why we have this deadline of June of 2017. So there were a couple of things that were asked that of us last time that Mrs. Robertson is going to address the couple of questions we have, and then we'll be ready to just jump right in and look at the different projects. Does anybody need a reminder of what the two types of bonds are? Okay. Allison and Debbie, will you give a reminder of the two types of bonds and how they apply to the projects?
Basically, the difference between the bonds would be, is it solely issued by the Urban Renewal Agency, or is it issued by the Urban Renewal Agency and backed by the full faith and credit of the city? If it's backed by the full faith and credit of the city, it gets a better interest rate, so the cost would be lower. But the city has more restrictions on how it can spend money. So some of the projects, for example, that might involve benefiting a private individual, the city can't participate in. So that's kind of where we're, which way do we want to go? Do we want to go with a more flexible urban renewal bonding only, which has more flexibility but has a higher cost? Or do we want to go with the city-backed bond, which has lower costs but more restrictions?
Allison, can you give an example of two of the types of projects?
Sure. So you may remember for the last bond that we did was city-backed, and the reason why we did that was the projects that Urban Renewal was focusing on at that time were just capital improvement projects, mostly public works projects. So we did the Whittler Pump Station, we did the connection of the Whittler Pump Station to the Wacoma Pump Station. We were doing a lot of those traditional important public works projects. So the city-backed bond worked great for that. However, if there were any projects that we had wanted to do at that time that were public-private partnerships or anything other than capital, then that particular bond would not have worked for those projects.
And those could be economic development activities, or they could also be facade rehabilitation, the loan program. Those are the types of projects that would require that we go with the non-city-backed bond.
Another example would be development partnerships.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Ward?
what's the cost difference between the two?
I don't have a number, but it's not going to be great. The difference in interest won't be great, and the bond itself being only $3 million and, having a 3-year repayment, it's not going to amount to a lot.
That's not going to affect the city's rate because it's signed on, it has potential liability, so it's not as strong. Is it?
I wouldn't expect that it would affect the cities because again, it's a small amount, $3 million, and from the city's finances, that's not a lot of debt to take on.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so, Madam Chair, we're ready to continue that discussion on the types of projects. If you were to determine that you did not want to do the city-backed bond where its full faith and credit is backing it, then you don't necessarily have to make a decision this evening. Okay? You could have more time, we could proceed forward with the issuance of the bond.
Madam Chair. I'm just curious, would there be an opportunity to flip this, not decide which bond we want, and see where the projects, don't we still have to prioritize projects, and are those the ones we're talking about?
Yes, you still have to do that, but the question that we were really addressing is there a deadline for making that decision for the issuance of the bond? If you are going to, if you want to do projects that would benefit the development, the loans, and so forth, we would have to know that tonight in order to be able to proceed with that. If you don't want to do any of those, that's fine as well. We can proceed, but just know you would lose many of the projects that are listed in there. Does that make sense in what I tried to say? Okay, let me try to say it another way. The reason why there is a deadline is to determine which type of bond that you want to issue. The bonds are based upon the types of projects. If you were to say tonight, we want to do public-private partnerships, we want to do the loan programs and those types of things that would require the bond that does not have the full faith and credit of the city, we can proceed with that bond, okay? And you would not have to make that decision this evening. If you were to determine that you only want to use that as the full faith and credit of the city, we could proceed, okay? But you simply would not be able to do the other projects. If you did not want to have any limitations on the projects but still need more to decide and said go forward, then we would proceed with the first bond I mentioned that doesn't have the full faith and credit of the city, okay? So the real question we're trying to address this evening is if you're ready to nail down a project, great. If you're ready to say we can't nail down the project, but we want to use the cheaper of the two bonds, that's great. If you're ready to say, go forward, but we don't know what project we're going to do, then we would go forward with the bond, the first bond, the one that doesn't have the full faith and credit. Now, did I get all that right?
Yeah, if I could add on.
Okay.
There will be a time when you need to decide the projects, regardless of which bond you go with. If you don't want to decide tonight, we would still need to have a pretty good decision by April 10th, because when we get to the point where we're asking for financing, they're going to want to know what projects we're financing. So we either need it tonight or by April 10th.
Madam Chair,
Ms. Hinton?
I have one more follow-up question. So you were talking about the different types of projects. I'm ready to go tonight. I've got my list. But are you, let me use an example. So those projects within the toolbox, let's say, those are projects that don't require the city backing, but it would fit better under the other type of bonding, is that correct?
Yes, most of what's in the toolbox are partnership projects where the funding goes to another organization or to a private entity to do a facade improvement or some other tool that you may or may not consider doing in the future. So those would need the more flexible type of bond and could not use the city-backed bond.
Okay, but we could also do city projects with that funding if some came to the list?
Yes.
Okay. But we couldn't do the reverse?
Correct.
Okay, I'm ready.
So the non-city bonds give us the greatest amount of flexibility.
Yes.
Let the record show that Mr. Hoagland has joined us. So any other questions for these three ladies? Did everyone have a chance to look at the memo that came in the packet with the answers to our questions? Follow-up questions on those?
Those undergrounding pictures look real good, Madam Chair.
Yes, thank you for providing those pictures.
You're welcome. I did bring them in PowerPoint. If you would like, I can flip through them.
That'd be wonderful, thank you.
Ed?
I just wanted to have you all keep in mind that the project photos for the before and after, what it might look like after undergrounding the utilities, is for a larger section than what the project was designed to do. The project design is for about 1,400 linear feet, mostly through the section from the north side of the Dee River, under the Dee River, and then ends at about, I believe it's Fleet. Ebb. I think it's Ebb. Where? I think it's Ebb Street. It's basically at the south end of the D Sands Motel, near the subway, right at that intersection.
So we're going to, the proposal is to underground clear past the D-Sands?
It will go to the end of that block.
And how far north?
It will go to the end of the block on the north side of the river, which is Northwest 2nd Drive.
Out of curiosity, what is the rationale between, to extend it actually a block beyond the Dee River Wayside?
It has to do with where there's space to put the utility boxes, where easements can happen, and where it makes sense to just end that electrical. It's the electrical engineers that determine, where it makes sense to end something based on the discussions that the agency had when we were talking about the preliminary design. And if they wanted to do, if you all wanted to do one side of the highway, which we first started with, or both sides of the highway, what the cost differences were for those. So those design decisions had all been made, and then the design was completed for both sides of the highway from Northwest 2nd Drive to Ebb. And that's the design that we have. But I wanted to just let you know that before we flip through these photos, because the photos show some undergrounding outside the project area.
Well, quite frankly, my concern, I like the idea of Dee River Wayside, but my concern is costs tend to escalate over time. And that could be a project, if we hit a snafu, that would take the whole budget, our remaining budget. How much additional cost, will it be to underground clear past the descends. And if it's significant, I mean, you can't see the ocean anyway. So why spend the extra money that we might not have?
Yeah, so I don't have a cost estimate for what it would be to extend the project limit, but I'll go ahead and flip through these photos, and then that'll kind of give you an idea of what lines are showing from which perspective, and then we can answer some more questions.
May I ask a question? So for this particular one, the 2.2 million that had been estimated, that's for both sides of the street?
It is both sides of the highway, from Northwest Second Drive to Ebb. Okay, so these are some photos before and after if you were traveling southbound. So we start, basically we started the photos where the overhead lines pop back up, because remember, they are undergrounded through Ocean Lake, and so this would be obviously the first opportunity from the, if you were driving southbound, where the lines show. So here's a before and an after. Here we are basically right in front of the Cultural Center, before and after. Basically right on the bridge of the Dee River. This does not have the new intersection, the new traffic signal, which is not on wires any longer. This was done before that traffic signal. So here's before and after. And before and after. And then if you were traveling northbound, coming down the hill, you can see here's before and after. In front of the D Sands, before and after. And near Pacific Power and after. And this is the last one. This you can see where the street lamps are on the east side of Highway 101, and then where the power lines are still remaining, and then after.
Will those lamps be lowered at all?
They would not be, no. We didn't do any lighting upgrades as part of the design for the utility undergrounding. We just focused on getting the lines under the ground.
So there wouldn't be like LED lights or?
No changes to lighting.
But this intersection wouldn't be
Yeah.
included in the plan
Right.
now.
This is further to the north, so I can back up.
So we-
This would be one of the before and afters that would apply for this project.
So may I ask another question? That 2.2 million for the undergrounding, is it only for that location? Or is it all of the ones that you've shown?
It's not all the ones that have been shown. It's just for basically what you see here, coming from the south, and then find the north. So this would be another one right here. One more. Nope. So just those two that basically show the intersection. It is mostly around the intersection. It's across the parking lot and then up across the D Sands. Just goes to the end of that block.
Where does it start again on the Kylo side?
On Northwest 2nd Drive. So it's basically the street that you turn on to go onto the Coast Road.
Finishes on the south? Where?
Finishes on the south at Ebb, southwest Ebb.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Rose?
maybe we've heard it, but I don't recall. Have we heard from any of the utilities providers? Is there a benefit to having, beyond aesthetics, to having wires buried? Is there a plus? Is there a con?
I wouldn't want to speak for them. I haven't heard that they have a preference either way. I know common sense would say, well, we have high winds, wouldn't we want them to be buried? Would they be less risk to coming down? I mean, I think, logic would say yes, but I don't know for sure what
Have we had any
Pacific
feedback
Powers.
from the Taft District? I mean, we buried them there.
I personally think there's an improvement for high winds and power outages since they've changed.
So we don't have anything from the utilities that say this is a plus or minus for us, with no input whatsoever on that?
I haven't talked to them about that for a while.
Because I still struggle with $2.5 million to make something look pretty. I'd rather give every, 50 businesses $50,000 and redo their facades and their landscaping and maybe some new signage, and I think our city would look a whole lot better, and we'd all do more business than if we bury a couple hundred or 1,000 feet of line. But that's just me.
I believe Pacific Power is on the agenda for the city council meeting tonight. That might be, I don't know if they'd be prepared to answer that, but
Thank you.
Mr. Anderson, do you have something to say?
No, I'm just hoping we can make a decision tonight, so I'd like to move along.
So, Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Ward?
so all those pictures you showed, though, of disappearing lines, you weren't including those in this project, is that right?
right, these are photos that were done before, when we were talking about the design and what the project limits should be. And so I just basically pulled those photos from before the design was complete. If you'd like me to spend more time on upgrading the photos, I'm happy to do that, but I chose not to spend time doing that at this time.
No, not at all, but you showed a lot of pictures, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this thing extends for everywhere. But you just had those and showed them. It's not really the actual parameters that you're talking about.
Yes.
Oh, got it. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I remember from last meeting, Riley and yourself were the only two that hadn't gotten much time to speak, and I wonder if, you could share with us your short list and why, and we could then at least have had everybody.
I would like to complete the projects that we've already spent money on. Be the projects that are underway, and number 13 and 14. And the remainder of the money I would like used in our toolbox. Riley, do you have priorities?
I think an increase in the toolbox was something that I believed could benefit. Again, so I understand, this 27 years has been something that people have foregone. What they let go some kind of increase so that at the end they could benefit. What was the idea of this again? You were Dick, you talked about it last time.
Well, I think what you're asking is the whole idea of urban renewal,
Right.
and the funding and
Correct.
why. Yeah. And
So they agreed to not, something happened, and that, so that at the end, something will happen.
What it is it's not the property owners that are foregoing something, it's the other taxing entities. So if a home is built and that lot was worth $10,000 and now the property is worth $100,000, that $90,000 would then be assessed normally to the various taxing districts, the city, the county, the school districts, and so forth.
All right.
What the taxing agencies gave up was for the length of the time period of our district, they gave up their amount of that $90,000 assessment. Now, was it 3 years ago? 3 years ago, we reduced that amount, and so instead of being 100%, it was 20% that was being collected by the city, and 80% was going back to the taxing entities. And so it's, our residents have always paid the same amount, it's just which taxing entity received it. And it was us, until 3 years ago, we received 100% of the increase, and now we receive 20% of the increase.
So the question is undergrounding would benefit the taxing entities, how? How would it give them a return on their disinvestment, I guess, or whatever you would say?
If it increases the taxable values of those properties, then they would receive more taxes. That's kind of the whole theory is we'll forego it for a while, you'll make investments, it'll increase the value of the land, and we'll get more taxes later on.
So does undergrounding increase
Well, that's-
value?
Now, the other part of it that you have to remember is that these are not projects that were solely approved by the city. All of the taxing entities, when the Urban Renewal District looked at the projects and said, yes, we approve of these projects. Now, I don't know that we can speak for the school district or anybody else, other than at the time this district was created, they were fine with the projects that were listed in the plan itself.
And they were also fine with the projects that we did in our last city-backed bond, because we went back to all of them and talked to them about what we had accomplished and what we were planning to do in the next several years.
How many taxing entities do we have?
10. The school district is not impacted. They're reimbursed by the state, just to clarify on that. They're the only one of the 10 that is.
So they always get their full percentage of $1,000 assessed value?
They do.
Councilor Hoagland, if I can, Chairman. I think your answer is don't look for the direct project to add assessed value unless you're going to build a building. And typically, Urban Renewal doesn't. But what we're doing by, putting pump stations in, increasing infrastructure, paving roads, burying wires, much the same way it's another approach to trying to beautify your area so that visitors have a good feel, because we know visitors turn into permanent residents and build things. And much to the mayor's point of, trying to improve facades and the look of the community. And I don't think you can argue against Taft and Ocean Lake looking so much better after the wires came down. Now that by itself doesn't do it, but it could and should be an incentive and something to build upon. And my point on the undergrounding was simply, if you're marketing an ocean community, your first view of the ocean ought to be spectacular. I mean, we're not only doing urban renewal dollars, we're doing VCB dollars and advertising and thinking about taking over that spot. Why wouldn't you want it to be your huge living room, windows washed daily?
I argue that people complain about wires that are visitors, and it's more of like a resident perspective.
Oh,
I would argue that, that's all.
I can tell you, I notice communities that don't have wires up. And I'm amazed. I had the luxury of going to the Rhine, Germany, this last summer. Amazed me that communities in Switzerland and Germany, old communities, buried their wires. And it shows.
Madam Chair. And I don't want to get into, I think we all know where our positions are on these between me and Mr. Anderson. But the idea, there's nothing that says we increase traffic in Ocean Lake because it was buried. We don't see any increase in business. We don't see any increase in residents. We don't see anything of the sort in Taft at all. Businesses, I think, are struggling as much or more, and I'm not saying it's because of that. I'm just saying I don't think it's helped anything. And I still say we're talking about $2.5 million to make a piece of property look pretty to people who are already here. If someone's doing a Google Earth search and going, oh, I'd like to go to Lincoln City, but darn, those wires are there. I just can't see going there. I don't see a value in it. I just don't. If we're flush with money, when we talk about other cities, we see somewhere like, I'll go back to Sisters. They've done the same thing. They've undergrounded. But they move forward with the facade. They have community standards that said, here's what we want our town to look like, and that followed with that. And to just do this, I'm sorry, and I'm not saying anything bad about Lincoln City, because I love it and it's my home, but it's lipstick on a pig. If we're not going to do a movement to get our city cleaned up, if we're going to bury the wires and we're going to have that to look at, I'm sorry. I cannot, in good conscience, talk to people and go, I was happy to say we spent $2.5 million on that. I'm sorry your business is falling down, but the wires aren't there. And so that's just my thought.
That's why I want to keep the money in the toolbox.
Absolutely.
Mr. Ward?
Mr. Oglen,
Go ahead, Dick.
no, Riley was asking questions. I didn't know if he'd finished. I didn't know, other than toolbox, where he...
Yeah, I think increasing the toolbox, and to further Mr. Williams' point, that, we would spend $2.5 million, and then 6 feet from that, there's a homeless person kind of sitting in a bus bin, you know what I mean, a bus station. So we can't provide something like that and then spend the money on that. So I think there are more important priorities to remove the blight, wholly than 1,000 feet. So how can we, I do that? I don't feel that it's a very good use of the money. The teen center, I think, is again something very important to have an outlet for the teens here in town, and again, affordable housing and workforce housing can be increased on that. Those things will increase, I think, those taxing entities, if they're having employment, if they have steady employment, if they have steady employees and things like that. I think that's really going to benefit the city more than 1,000 feet of line-free area. I just have to keep going back to what's really beneficial to the city that couldn't get done any other way. I think that's part of what urban renewal is that a way for things to get done that don't really have a funding source. So putting all of our eggs in this little 1,000-foot basket, I think, is not the best use of the money.
Mr. Ward, did you have something to add?
Well, I would like to see a bid on this so we knew what type of money we were really going to spend. Right now, we haven't had it. How long has the current plan been in place that we actually went out and spent money for it?
So the last design was completed in March of 2015.
Okay.
It was $144,000, and so we have a completed design that's available. We don't know how much brushing up it would need, and we do have other projects that the city has done that have would inform this work in terms of boring. We would have to go under the Dee River, and in order to do that, we would need to pursue easements to go under the Dee River for $140,000. And the reason is because these are communications cables, not essential services like water and sewer. And then what was the other thing I was going to mention? Oh, the cost estimate is just over $2 million, which is why the 2.2 is listed, because it would be construction, and then we also need project management and the easements and the design costs, which are already there.
So didn't we start out just doing Dee River, or the Dee River Wayside, then we went over and did the undergrounding on the East Town side? Yeah?
Yes, we started on the west side only,
Yes.
and then we included the east side, which I believe was an extra, it was either 30 or 60,000 additional to do both sides. And the reason is because in order to do just the west side, the power poles that would be needed to hold up the wires on the east side, which would carry the burden of all those communications, would need to be really, really significant poles. They're like 36-inch bases, and they're mega poles. And so the cost of those poles was pretty great. And so the conversation, I think, and there were some of you here at that time, but whether or not to pay for poles and lead lines on the east side or to pay a little bit more and underground both sides. And the decision at that time was to underground both sides. Why we went under the river, the conversation was really focused on where is the viewscape? Where do you see the ocean? And then what span of highway is essential to underground in order to capture that full viewscape of the ocean, which is why it was scaled down to cover just the project area that it is now. They felt, the agency at the time that made those decisions felt it was not necessary to underground where there was no ocean view. So,
But aren't we undergrounding in front of D-Sands?
yes, and if you look back, there's
There's no ocean view there.
for northbound coming down the highway.
I noticed that on the northbound seams that would make a big difference. Just past there.
Yeah, so here's, this is outside the project area, but you can see the D-Sands and the ocean in the distance. So this section would not be undergrounded. And then this section, you can see in front of the D-Sands on the left has power lines up. And
Well, how much did the D-Sands extension more will it cost to have that?
I don't have that in front of me. I don't, I'd have to request it from the design engineer because we did not look at segmenting it for that part.
Yeah. It's just, we had a hell of a time burrowing under Schooner Creek.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that, I'll say it again and then I won't say it again. It's just, these things get runaway costs, and it's amplified when you start going under rivers.
Yeah, it's a big project.
Yeah.
The other comment I'd like to make about, you mentioned about having a bid price. We can't really bid it until we have a design that is certain of, being built. So we would need to spend some costs to brush up the design before we bid it. And we wouldn't want to bid it until we had the easements. So, that's kind of
Right now,
how-
for me, it's a bit of a pig in a poke, And what I'm hearing is most of us want to have some degree of certainty that we've left some tools in the toolbox and aren't just going to be skeletar going out. That's my concern. It's a great opportunity to work with the VCB and make something really special. But I would hate to do that at the cost of every single other little project that we would have.
Yeah, so the toolbox also, just so you know, was originally created with about 1.2 million in revolving funds, and I think there's about 600 or 700 left that you'll eventually see once we get into budget discussions that is available for going out for the programs that you have at this point.
But, yeah, we want other programs in the future, so we want something to be in that box.
I have a question, Allison. Amongst the design concept, I noticed other underlying areas in the city are not as close to the river and the ocean as this D-Lake area. Has that been taken into consideration for flooding? How far down do they go? Is it susceptible to being eroded? I know they're going to bore under it, but would it be wiser to have these wires above ground in case there is flooding, they're accessible? Just asking a question.
Certainly. So I believe if you look at our water line project at Schooner Creek, that actually protects the lines, and they're deep enough that scouring, and erosion, it would take a long time to reach those lines. And we already, we have a sewer line and we have a water line under the D River. And so we're, taking our lines, those lines have been in for a really long time. And then we were eliminating the water line that's on the bridge there as well, so.
How many feet down is it?
Those are probably about 30 feet.
30 feet?
But this is a different type of line, too. It's smaller.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
A question, you also on that question and answer memo that you included, you showed some of the properties that we own, the agency owns and are for development.
Yes.
Is there, so I'm making an assumption that they will be developed, perhaps some funds from those properties will come back into the agency. Are those, could you remind us what happens to that cash as it comes back into the agencies and what they can be used for?
New territory. So we haven't done any property development. I don't, since we haven't, I don't know what the demand is yet, and I don't know what the profit, if any, might be as we develop those properties. Around those properties, we have done significant investments in roads. So I think, there wouldn't be a need to do a lot more for public works, from urban renewal or other sources to partner with developers, but I just can't, I can't predict it because we haven't had any local conversations about market on.
I guess what I'm looking for is to give Councilor Ward some assurances that perhaps there's a safety valve for, the the tool kit. If for some reason you have to temporarily take some money from one account into finishing the wiring undergrounding project, that as soon as we develop and funds come back in, they can go to the toolkit. That's the kind of thing that I think we've got some reserves, assets that are yet to be tapped that can come.
As Madam Chair, as the properties are sold, the money, of course, comes back to the entity, the Urban Renewal Agency, to be used. Off the top of my head, for each of those properties, I couldn't tell you if there's restrictions that would be based on how that is reused, but it would come back again to the city or to the Urban Renewal Agency to use.
I noticed that one of the properties on that list is the property at Northeast First, and undergrounding lines right there could make that property a lot more marketable.
Am I the only one? Am I the only one that's bothered by the lines going clear past to Ebb Street? I mean, to me, that...
I thought it was excessive until I looked, and this isn't the...
You only got a view that big.
Well, no, it's that whole view when you're headed north where you see Cascade Head and you see the ocean. And to not have lines there would be wonderful.
So I think those are things, as you get into it, you can adjust. I'm trying to remember, but there's something about when you stop underlining, you then go up, and that pole has to be stout, and deciding where that was going to be, I think, had something to do with it, because we had the same discussion on going north.
There are driveways along that section that have to be accommodated, and there are vault boxes that have to go in when you start or stop.
So may I ask, go ahead. I was just going to say, what if? So if we did the undergrounding here, then we would have $1 million point something left for the toolbox. Is that right? Or would it be more?
Yeah, so for the bond, it's just under $3 million. It's like 2,957, something like that. So it's just under $3 million, and that is the decision we're hoping that you all will make tonight or soon, and in order for us to move forward with the bond sale. Then there's another $500,000 that is available in our existing funds that you can also make decisions about as you'd like. So in total, it's $3.5 million. The undergrounding is estimated at 2.2. I wish I had a crystal ball. We can imagine we would need to spend a little bit more to dust off the plans and then proceed with obtaining the easements and then going to bid. And until we go to bid, until we go to bid, we don't know for certain how much that would be able to be constructed for.
So, but there would be about $1 million left over
Yes.
for other projects, like such as the toolbox, so we can keep generating roof facades and
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Ward?
what's the value of our undeveloped properties?
So the 15th Street property is about $124,000. First Street property is about $796,000. Southeast 32nd Street, $371,000.
I'm sorry, what was that?
$371,000 for Southeast 32nd Street in Nelscott. Now, keep in mind that that was the amount valued for the parcels before the road was built. So that will be a little bit smaller. Right now, we have 0.8 of an acre remaining, so I'm not exactly sure what the absolute hard-lined value is on that property. And then for the Taft properties at Southwest 51st, it's about $1,650,000.
So that's $2.5 million just in property. How long have we had that property?
We started purchasing, I believe, in '96, and then all the way up through, I think, 2005.
Is any of it listed for sale?
No.
Because it seems to me that might be, I'm just trying to dig up as much money as I can. So at least selling some of those might help us with making things nicer.
Yeah, they were purchased with the intention of having certain restrictions put on them in terms of what the agency wanted to create as part of the overall vision for those parts of town. So simply listing them and selling them is definitely an option, but the idea was to really make sure that we are getting the redevelopment projects that the community in that part of town needs in order to help improve the economy and the direction of what that community vision was. So 15th Street, we will be moving forward with in this current fiscal year in terms of development partnerships. And then the other three properties will be part of a larger effort that we'll talk about at the next meeting with economic development, and taking a larger look at marketing the city as a whole and then offering properties as people are interested.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not being the least bit critical. It just seems like it sounds like there's been almost 20 years has passed. And if something was going to happen, maybe it was already going to happen. And maybe if we're not able to do that, we can get it over to somebody that is.
Yes, and that's the key of the development partnership, is to find a developer who can move that vision forward. So
And we're currently looking for those developers?
we will be soon.
Okay.
Madam Chair, if I might throw one more monkey wrench into this, as you talk about properties that we own that are to be developed. If you look at a traditional incubator program that is meant to help our business community grow, one of the ideas when you sell that property is to use that to, again, buy property, or whether that's bare ground or property to be rehabilitated, and then go into another private partnership to continue to help our businesses grow, attract businesses, improve businesses, whatever it might be. If you use those funds for a one-time infrastructure project, then those opportunities are gone.
I'd also like to mention that while these are the four properties that are undeveloped that the agency owns, the agency also has acquired the two properties, the Cultural Center and the Glass Studio, that are active, viable tenants and contributions to the community. So it's not as though nothing has been done. I know you weren't making that assumption, but I just wanted to mention that, there are those two other properties owned by the agency that are.
I'm sorry, Alice. I was not being critical at all.
I just wanted to throw that in.
And Urban Renewal's had some shining examples, and one of them is the glass foundry for the Taft being down there, it would be much worse if they weren't there, so.
Yes, and I would like for the agency to have the opportunity to have 4 additional shining examples.
And I
But
would
you're
push
right.
you on that.
Yeah, and
That's what I'm, these are,
yes. But you're right. You all will have to decide if the value of the land is worth more in money or in the development partnership. And we will be talking about that.
yeah, and my objection is, not objection, but concern is that they're sitting there static. Let's do something with those.
I share that objective.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
One more thing as to where we are at this point. Again, coming back to the bonds, what I'm generally hearing from you is that there is support for some of the money to go for the toolbox. If that is the case, then we would be able to proceed with the bonds that are not the city-backed bonds.
Thank you. That's where I was hoping to get the conversation back to. So is there general consensus that we should go with urban renewal bonding that allows us more flexibility?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. All right, any other comments before we wrap up the meeting?
I have one comment for our attorney. Do we need a motion on that to begin the proceeding?
I always prefer a motion.
Okay. Okay. Do I hear a motion?
I move to, I'm not sure.
Proceed with the issuing of the urban renewal bonds.
Okay.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to proceed with issuance of urban renewal bonding. All those in favor?
Discussion.
Discussion, thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
And just, I'm going to throw it out one more time, that the idea that that will improve anyone's property value is beyond, fixing sidewalks will improve a home's value, improve a business's value. Parks will improve a neighborhood's value. 1,000 feet of wire is not going to improve anyone's property value.
Okay, what we just
I understand, I'm just my
What we just agreed on is that some money would go towards the economic development toolkit.
Right.
Right.
Right, I just said, just going to throw out my
And
2
that's
cents worth
what
one
will,
last time.
I think that's what you were saying. will
Exactly,
help.
I just
Okay.
wanted to say it one more time.
Well, can I, again, that wasn't the motion. The motion was to, the bond
Absolutely.
from our discussion be a flexible bond, which is the urban renewal, not the city. We haven't agreed. It just, we surmised that funds might go to the toolbox, which would dictate a more flexible need for a flexible bonding.
I only said what I said because we're running out of time, and I didn't have a chance before the motion was made, so I just wanted to get it out there one more time. That's all I'm
But
saying.
let's stay with the motion.
Okay, all those in favor of the motion, which was to go ahead with issuance of the urban renewal bonds. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Thank you.
So are we going to get to projects, so, you know,
By April, we need to have projects, yes.
Yeah, it's a journey, not a destination, Dick.
we think government takes a long time to grow.
In
Your-
45-minute increments. Yeah.
Your next meeting is really your drop-dead date
Okay.
in order to meet our April 10th deadline.
I want everyone to come back with a definite list.
I have mine now, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, before you do, though, could I, while staff is still here, though, just a question back to Councilor Hoagland, who in his list had, you know, teen center and affordable housing and workforce housing and all those kind of things. I just want to make sure that any of that stuff, remember, has to be in the district.
I'm clear.
Okay. And,
Thank you for making that clarification.
yeah, I mean, sometimes, and think about, you know,
Where it could be.
and how you do housing. I mean, we already have zoning, that kind of stuff. And housing is a big thing, but,
Thank you.
okay, just want to make sure we're on the same track.
Absolutely.
And meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
We're going to have a 10-minute break.
Take a few minutes and,
Yeah.
you guys, no later than 6:05, though.
What is that?